Hello. It is a great pleasure for me to be able to talk with you in this manner and tell you something about how PMI got started and also give you some insights into what the state of the art in project management was in the 1950s and 1960s. In addition, I would like to share with you briefly some of my project experiences over the years in your part of the world. Slide 2, since I'm not there in Moscow with you, I thought I would show you my face as proof that I'm still here. I will be celebrating my 92nd birthday that next month, and I expect to reach at least 100 the way I feel right now. I guess that demonstrates what good project management can do for anyone. Slide 3, I was manager of project controls at Aerojet General Corporation in 1959 in California when the PERT system was introduced for the Polaris submarine weapon system. Aerojet General designed, developed, and manufactured the solid rocket and its thrust vector control systems for the Polaris missile. We developed the first mainframe computer system for creating project schedules using the PERT approach. There were only a few mainframe computer programs available in the 1960s for processing either CPM or PERT network plans for projects. IBM's PMS for Project Management System was one of the most widely used at that time. Many computers like the IBM 1130 that could analyze small PERT and CPM network plans were introduced in 1965, and PCs had not yet been developed. For example, the Apple II was introduced in 1977. Slide 4. In the 1960s, Eric Jeanette would send me via courier service the handwritten data input sheets for his company's project plans, and we would key punch each line of data and process it on mainframe computers in Los Angeles. When finished, we would ship back to him in Houston heavy boxes with many pages of printouts, usually including many error messages, for his team to analyze and revise. Typical network plans for large projects in those days were composed of thousands of activities in hand-drawn networks. At the time PMI was formed, we were only experimenting with computer-driven plotters to draw networks, and on-screen graphic networks were not available until the 1980s. Eric Jeanette invited me to meet with Jim Schneider and others to discuss the idea of forming an association for project planning. Slide 5. In 1967, our book was the first to be published on this subject, although there were many articles available at that time in various professional journals and popular trade magazines. Slide 6. This table of contents will give you some idea of the state of the art in the 1960s. Network plans were drawn by hand. Many users simply based their activity time estimates on their memories of what resources would probably be available. But by 1969, cost and resource information could also be entered into the network plan data. We described in the book a variety of case studies in various industries where PERT and CPM networks were being used. In the 1960s, using computer programs to create project plans or any other types of action plans, including production control, was a completely new idea in almost all industries. Appendix B of the book describes the precedence diagram method, or PDM, of planning, which came out too late for us to integrate it into the text of the book. PERT required and used 3 estimates of activity duration, and Appendix C showed that the statistical approach used in PERT analysis was incorrect. Actually, Vladimir Lieberzohn's Russian SPIDER project application uses 3-time estimates of time and resources in a statistically correct manner. The 4 pages of bibliography in the book shows that there was an abundance of literature available then on our general subject of project planning and scheduling. You can still buy used copies of this book on Amazon if you are interested. Slide 7. This figure from our book shows the parallel development during the 1960s of CPM in the construction and process industries and PERT in the aerospace industries. PDM did not initially include much emphasis on events, but many PDM users find it useful to also define and schedule events in addition to activities. Slide 8. We learned in the 1960s that it was necessary to define a project systematically using the work breakdown structure WBS concept. This figure from our 1967 book illustrates what we called a model project planning and scheduling system. Slide 9. Processing a project plan in those days was a labor-intensive job. Here are a few key points in that regard. We would have to wait for processing a network overnight and then receive a printout listing many errors, both in planning logic and key punching errors of the input data. Slide 10. Network planning and scheduling systems were used in a number of industries in the 1960s, but project management as we know it today was not recognized as a core competence as it is today in many industries. Slide 11, back to the formation of PMI. Keeping in mind the overall state of the art, several practitioners using PERT, CPM, PDM felt the need for a professional association to promote the acceptance and development of these concepts and systems. We decided to broaden our scope beyond network planning to focus on all the aspects of project management. Slide 12. Here is an early letter on the subject. You can see the reference here to a national CPM society, and here are the names of the few people who were involved at that time. Slide 13, we decided to hold the first PMI meeting on October 9th and 10th, 1969 in Atlanta, Georgia. There were about 40 people who were interested enough to pay the annual dues of US dollars, $20 or so. Slide 14, here is the original agenda for our first PMI meeting, which we titled Advanced Project Management Concepts. I presented the first paper. James Kelly presented the second one. He and Morgan Walker were the developers at the DuPont Corporation in the 1950s. DuPont, of course, is a large multinational chemical and engineering company known throughout the world. Kelly and Walker wrote the first published article on CP/M in 1959. DuPont had considered it a trade secret that gave them a major competitive advantage before that article was published. Slide 15, Jim Snyder introduced the formation of PMI at the dinner meeting on October 9, 1969. Slide 16, on the second day of the meeting, Professor John Fondel from Stanford University, who was the author of the precedence diagram method, presented a paper on PDM that he titled "The Use of Non-Computer Techniques in Job-Level Project Management." Slide 17. Here is a link where you can download my paper from that first PMI meeting. It talks about some challenges that we still have not yet completely resolved. Slide 18. This is one of the key points that I made in 1969 that is still a challenge today. The project management software applications like Spider Project are much more user-friendly than they were in the 1960s. But I believe that the two different skill sets still must be recognized. Perhaps Vladimir Lieberzohn and others can comment on this point during their presentations today at this Moscow conference. Slide 19, we held a second national PMI meeting in St. Louis, Missouri in 1970, and the third one in Houston, Texas, 1971. Other chapters were also formed over the next few years across the USA, and the first chapters outside the US were in Canada. Slide 20, here I am giving the keynote address in Houston in 1971, which was also the time of the founding meeting of the Houston PMI chapter. Slide 21, PMI had plenty of problems in its early years, which were mainly financial. Jim Snyder used his garage at home as the PMI headquarters office and spent many volunteer hours keeping PMI going. Eric Jeanette used the facilities and financial support of the Brown and Root Company in Houston to reproduce and mail PMI's project management journal that was edited by dedicated volunteers. PMI's finances were always in a very shaky condition for a number of years. It was difficult for our completely volunteer staff to spend the time required to develop and grow the organization. Finally, we hired a professional staff, and our paid executive director changed several times over the years before PMI really started to grow. Many of the old-timers expressed their dissatisfaction with the emphasis that exists today on generating income as the main reason behind some of PMI's activities and programs. But in terms of membership growth, PMI is certainly a success today. Slide 22. Here are a few links for further information on those early days of PMI. My paper shown here was written about 1990. Here is what I said then about the three killer problems in the use of network planning and scheduling techniques. Number one, no structure. Many planners still, as we did in the beginning, simply plunge into detailed activity and event lists and networks on big projects without systematically breaking down the project. This was a killer 50 years ago and remains so today. Number two, too much detail. Planners still get suckered into huge amounts of detail simply because, quote, the computer software can handle it. This, especially when coupled with no structure, has always been and continues to be a fatal mistake in the effective use of network planning. Number three, user-unfriendly software. Younger PMI members really don't know and appreciate how good it is today with project planning and control software. But some programs are still much too hard to understand and to use properly. I think these are still some of the biggest challenges today in project planning and scheduling, but also there is still too wide a gulf between project managers and executive branches on one hand, and the effective usage of the powerful project planning and control systems that are available today. Slide 23. My wife and I took a wonderful cruise from St. Petersburg to Moscow in 1999, and David Pelz put me in contact with Vladimir Lieberzon, whom we met in Moscow. I then sent him a copy of my 1992 book, Managing High Technology Programs and Projects, which he arranged for to be translated and published in Russian. He shared with me the capabilities in his SPIDER project information system, which has these significant advances over our competing Western systems. Vladimir and I have collaborated on several papers and workshops and seminars over the years. Slide 24. Here are links to 3 of the papers and slides that we presented over the years in the USA, in Mexico, and the Netherlands that are related to the SPIDER project application system. Slide 25. SPIDER project has a number of advanced capabilities that are not available in most, if any, of the Western information systems for project, program, and portfolio management. I have highlighted these in the appendix of my 2003 book, which also was published in Russian. Slide 26. I would like to make one last observation to you here today. We continue to see too many reports in every country about failures in managing projects. I believe that many of these failures are caused by senior executives not understanding and not demanding the effective application of the powerful project, program, and portfolio management systems that are available today. These executives do not understand that project, program, and portfolio management is a vital core competence of every competitive enterprise today. I have co-authored with my grandson Shane Archibald this short book directed to these executives to overcome this lack of understanding. When the demands that we present here are achieved, the failures in project management will be significantly reduced. Slide 27. The book is available. In fact, a second edition of the book has been released December the 4th of this year. And I hope that you might find it useful to your executives. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak with you all. I wish you all good luck with all of your projects.